What about yous? Delighted to be here. Thanks very much, Eugene and Angelina, for your introduction. Thank you and congratulations, Bishop Allen, and to your whole team in Down and Connor for bringing us all together today. It's a truly wonderful opportunity to share our experiences of faith development, parish renewal, and so many other things. And I'm honoured to be here to introduce the morning by reflecting on the encyclical of Pope Francis, Dilexit Nos. He loved us. And I wondered actually why Bishop Allen asked me to speak on this topic, but then I should have known he's a Jesuit. And the Jesuits, I believe, were given the prime place to drive the devotion to the Sacred Heart 350 years ago. I asked Father Barney McGuckian the other day, how did the Jesuits get associated with this? And I was wondering maybe the Pope or someone at the time had asked the Jesuits to do this. He says, Our Lady, our Blessed Mother, she was the one who decided that the SJs should drive the mission of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and they've done a really good job. And I actually think it's really interesting that Pope Francis, as Father Eugene said there, in the middle of the Synod on Synodality, releases a very reflective and almost devotional in some ways, contemplative encyclical. And I wondered, why did he do that? Is it because he was a Jesuit? Is it because he felt he was coming near the end of his time, and in some way he wanted to sum up his entire manifesto, which of course was all about evangelization and mission, but to situate it in this very powerful driving force of the love of God, and then of course the human and divine love in the heart of Jesus. Whatever his reason, I think in the middle of the synod we were distracted, maybe reading a lot about what was going on at the discussions there. And I think that many of us perhaps never really got a chance to reflect and to study Dilexit Nos. He loved us. And like all of the writings of Pope Francis, it's rather long. It's 250 paragraphs long. And I thought, there's no way in such a short time I can take you through Dilexit Nos. But what I wanted to do was just to dip into it in the context of this particular conference, and to reflect on what is he actually saying. So as you can see here, I've picked out a number of paragraphs just to reflect on those, almost in a meditative way for us at the beginning of our conference. In an age of superficiality, where we're all running around frenetically, insatiable consumers, slaves to the market, unconcerned about the deeper meaning of our lives, all of us need to rediscover the importance of the heart. And that is really what motivates the entire encyclical of Pope Francis. Instead of always running around with these superficial distractions and satisfactions, we would do well to think about the really important questions of life. And what's beautiful at the beginning of the Dilexit Nos is Pope Francis actually asks us a number of questions, which he says we should all be thinking about. And it's worth doing that as we begin this morning. Who am I really? What am I looking for? What direction do I want to give to my life, my decisions, and my actions? Why? Why am I in this world? And for what purpose? When my life is nearing the end, how do I want to look back on it? What meaning do I want to give to all my experiences? What do I want to be for others? Who am I for God? And when I read that first, I thought, yeah, this is what we should all be doing from time to time, is asking ourselves these questions. What's going on in my heart? But for this conference, I invite you to consider the questions once more, but thinking about your parish or your congregation, if you're a religious, or your prayer group or whatever. Who are we really as a parish or as a diocese maybe? What are we looking for? What direction do we want to give to our decisions and our actions? Why and for what purpose are we in the world? How do we want to look back at the end of a year or at the end of a period of innovation? What meaning do we want to give in our parish or our diocese or whatever to all our experiences? What do we want to be for others? Who are we for God? Pope Francis was very clear. All of these questions lead us back to the heart. And when we reflect on the heart of Jesus, we're thinking of a heart full of love. In a word, he says, if love reigns in our heart, then we become, in a complete and luminous way, the persons we are meant to be. It's all about love. The love of the heart of Jesus. The love that God showed us first. To be conscious that every human being is created above all else for love. In the deepest fiber of our being, we are made to love and to be loved. And it was very interesting the other day, Pope Leo drew attention to St. Augustine's beautiful words. You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. So Dilexit Nos really is all about the heart, and the opening sections of it, Pope Francis reflects on what we mean by the word heart. And of course, even in our daily language, we don't just mean a physical organ that's pumping blood around our bodies. We use phrases like broken-hearted. That person has a cold heart. He's hard of heart. I really wish I could have a change of heart. I will take your hearts of stone, give you hearts for love. We use that word, we sing that word so often. We talk about somebody who is big-hearted. And in a way, Pope Francis, in his opening paragraphs, in his opening chapters, reflects on how we use the word heart. And that leads him on to thinking of our world today. In a lot of his writings, as you know, he uses this methodology of see, judge, act. Well, in Dilexit Nos, he does the same. He reflects on our world. He reflects on our world with all of the war and the violence, the greed, the displacement of people, human trafficking. He reflects on a world where people are hungry, where the earth itself is crying out along with the poor. And he reflects on our world and asks himself, does our world have a heart? What has happened to our world? And what I thought was really interesting was, as you know, we had the consecration of Ireland to the Sacred Heart of Jesus last Sunday in Knock. And for that, I was reading back to 1873, when the Irish bishops decided to consecrate Ireland to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The first country, I think, in the world to do it in 1873. And the bishops did it because they were looking at the world, both internationally, and they were looking at Ireland, coming out of the famine, the kind of struggles that the church had at that time. And this is how they began their pastoral letter on Passion Sunday 1873, which was actually done to commemorate the beginning of the revelations of the Sacred Heart to St. Margaret Mary 150 years later. Or 200 years later, of course, 1673 to 1675, those were the dates when St. Margaret Mary had those revelations. So in 1873, the Irish bishops issued a pastoral letter beginning with these words: "There are many weighty evils, my dear people, pressing on the Church of God throughout the world. And there are many dangers encompassing and threatening ourselves here nearer home. The spirit of irreligion and infidelity is growing strong every day." So a rather bleak reflection on the world of that time. But strangely, you could possibly argue that there are similar feelings today amongst a lot of people. And it's interesting. Here's the kind of equivalent paragraph which Pope Francis used in Dilexit Nos. "For this reason," he says, "we witness the outbreak of new wars with the complicity, tolerance, or indifference of other countries, or petty power struggles over partisan interests. We may be tempted to conclude that our world is losing its heart. We need only to see and listen to the elderly women from both sides who are at the mercy of these devastating conflicts. It is heartbreaking to see them mourning for their murdered grandchildren, or longing to die themselves after losing the homes where they spent their entire lives. To see these elderly women weep and not feel that this is something intolerable is a sign of a world that has grown heartless." So Pope Francis, just late last year, was inviting us to turn to the Sacred Heart of Jesus because of the state of our world. The Irish bishops in 1873 were doing precisely the same, reflecting on the state of the world and the state of the church in Ireland. They were calling people to the Sacred Heart. And that theme goes right through the history of the Christian church. It's not just unique to St. Margaret Mary, or indeed to the Irish bishops, or indeed to Pope Francis, God rest him. It was interesting that at the Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes, taking the heart seriously then has consequences for society as a whole. The Second Vatican Council teaches that every one of us needs a change of heart. And we're talking here about our parishes, our dioceses. It's all about renewal, isn't it? It's about putting fresh heart into what we do. But this is an amazing quotation from Gaudium et Spes. "The imbalances affecting the world today are in fact a symptom of a deeper imbalance rooted in the human heart." In pondering the tragedies afflicting our world, the Council urges us to return to the heart. And it's so beautiful that this conference has chosen the theme, Hearts on Fire. We're in the middle of the novena to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. As Bishop Allen said, on Friday we celebrate the feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. On Saturday, the feast of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And we're asking the Lord, this is a prayer that Pope Francis inserts. Let's just pray it together here quietly. In the presence of the heart of Christ, I once more ask the Lord to have mercy on this suffering world in which he chose to dwell as one of us. May he pour out the treasures of his light and love, so that our world, which presses forward despite wars, socioeconomic disparities, and uses of technology that threaten our humanity, may regain the most important and necessary thing of all, its heart. That's what Dilexit Nos is about. The world, we, our parishes, our dioceses, our country, We need to find our heart. And to do so, we're reflecting, of course, on the heart of Jesus. And I imagine that many of us, if not all of us, grew up with a Sacred Heart picture in our homes. And the features of that picture, of course, the open heart of Jesus. You know, the rays of light coming from that heart. The fire which is consuming the heart, but the heart is not burnt. Reminding us, of course, of Exodus and the fire in which God was present, Yahweh was present. The crown of thorns, the cross, the wounded hands, reflecting the suffering, the cross, which was the means of our salvation. The pierced side or the pierced heart. Very interestingly in Dilexit notes, if you get a chance to read it or reflect on it, Pope Francis describes how the real Sacred Heart devotion developed out of a much more ancient devotion to the wounds of Christ, the sacred side or the pierced side. The fact that the sword pierced his heart, from which came blood and water, which was the wellspring, of course, of the church, of the sacraments, of the graces of the church. And that idea of wounded heart, a pierced heart, the crowned heart, the forgiving heart, the wellspring of the sacraments, leading us and lighting the way to the merciful heart, the Father, the home of the Father, and of course, God who loved us first. In Ireland, of course, we embraced this devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus very strongly, thanks to our Jesuit brothers who actually promoted the messages of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, St. Claude de la Colombière, the writings about St. Margaret Mary. And that idea of a devotional revolution in Ireland in the 19th century, picking up after the bishop's call for the consecration. The Irish Messenger. The Irish Messenger was the vehicle, really, where the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus spread throughout Ireland. Alongside that, encouraging people to join the apostleship of prayer, all the confraternities to the Sacred Heart of Jesus that were formed around Ireland, churches, schools dedicated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And of course, teaching our children to pray the morning offering. O Jesus, through the most pure heart of Mary, I beg to offer you all the prayers, works, and sufferings of this day for all the intentions of your Sacred Heart. All for thee, O Sacred Heart of Jesus, all for thee. Generations of young people, children, adults, grandparents, parents prayed those prayers, giving Ireland a very strong devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. But all the time, pointing, of course, that this was not in itself what it was all about, but the heart of Christ is the symbol of the deepest and most personal source of his love for us, which is at the very core of the teachings of the gospel. And when you read Dilexit Nos, Pope Francis goes through the gospels, reflects on how much the heart of Jesus was at play in all that he did, all that he said, all that he witnessed to. That forgiving heart reaching out to sinners, to the sick, to those in need. Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened. That invitation to his heart, which was continually in everything he said and thought and did. Because it is important for us to realize that devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus is not some kind of spiritual devotion which is all up there. It is very much incarnational. The title of Dilexit Nos is a reflection on the human and divine love of the heart of Jesus. And it is important for us to see his heart not merely as a symbol for some kind of disembodied spiritual truth. In gazing upon the Lord's heart, we are contemplating a physical reality, his human flesh, which enables him to possess genuine human emotions and feelings like ourselves. So the Word was made flesh. That's at the heart of Sacred Heart devotion. We see that so much in the writings of so many saints, which Pope Francis takes us through one by one, these amazing holy women and men of the Church. But what is interesting is that sometimes in our parishes, over recent decades anyway, we perhaps forgot a lot of the popular piety, which was in there and in the genes of our people, which keeps emerging. And therefore, I think we're all quite amazed sometimes at how much popular piety draws people in. And sometimes in our parishes we should be careful not to forget about it, but perhaps to use it to facilitate our way of renewing personal relationship with Christ and with the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So it's interesting in Dilexit Nos chapter or section 60, Pope Francis, talking about Sacred Heart devotion, says, this together with popular piety preserved the relationship of the corporal, psychological and historical reality of Jesus. The Stations of the Cross, devotion to Christ's wounds, his precious blood, his Sacred Heart. And I have to admit that whenever we were talking this year about having a Sacred Heart crusade in Ireland, quite a lot of people says, are you sure? Is that really what we should be doing? Yes, that stuff, Pope Francis is clear. There is a powerful resource here if we allow it to draw us into reflection on the Incarnation, the Word made flesh who lived among us, and allow it to nourish our theology, our hearts. Look at Ireland. Croagh Patrick, Loch Derg, Graveyard Sundays, which is happening around a lot of our parishes at the moment, Holy Wells, Mass Rocks. These we forsake at our peril. And we should, in any talk about our renewal, rejuvenation, renovation, whatever term we give it, that we realize we also have something very deep in the psyche of our people which we can tap into. But of course, this is Pope Francis talking here. Very quickly he's going to move from see and judge to act. And that is why it was interesting in the introduction to hear Pope Francis himself said, yes, this is a contemplative, reflective, spiritual, meditative encyclical. But it's all about mission. He was very clear on that. And for a very large section of the Dilexit Nos, he talks about the spiritual and apostolic dynamism of devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Pope John Paul II said the same to our Jesuit friends. All the members of the society, Bishop Allen, and others, are to be even more zealous in promoting this devotion. He did so because he recognized the profound connection between devotion to the heart of Christ and Ignatian spirituality. For the desire to know the Lord intimately, to have a conversation with him heart to heart, is characteristic of the Ignatian spiritual and apostolic dynamism. So very, very clearly, Pope Francis very quickly wants to shift us on. And he picks a number of really interesting holy men and women to reflect on. He has quite a large section about St. Charles de Foucauld. I'm sure some of you are well aware of this amazing holy man. lived the end of the last century, 1850s through, and he died martyred actually in 1916. Charles de Foucault's friendship with Jesus, heart to heart, was anything but a privatized piety. And that's the point I'm trying to get across here. Sacred Heart devotion is not a privatized piety. It inspired the austere life that he led, born of a desire to imitate Christ and be conformed to him. His loving devotion to the heart of Jesus had a concrete effect on his style of life. I think it's really good to remember St. Charles de Foucault sought to imitate Jesus by living and acting as he did. Look at the second paragraph there. The desire to bring the love of Jesus to others, his missionary outreach to the poorest and the most forgotten of our world, led him to take his emblem in the words, Jesus Caritas. Do you know that little emblem of the confraternities? The heart and the cross. And here we have a saint who really felt that the love of the heart of Jesus needs to radiate out from everything we do. And it's interesting to see this of his own words. Charity has to radiate from our fraternities as it radiates from the heart of Jesus. Now, if you transfer those words, charity has to radiate from my life as it radiates from the heart of Jesus. Or think of your parish. Charity has to radiate from our parishes, our dioceses, our religious congregations, our prayer groups, just as it radiates from the heart of Jesus. This love is not to be kept to ourselves. The love of the heart of Jesus for men and women, the love that he demonstrated in his passion, is what we need to have for all human beings. That is the force of energy that comes from the heart of Jesus. Another saint, Pope Francis, reflects beautifully on her. If you're a fan of Saint Thérèse of Lisieux, as I know many of you are, he sees her as a prime example of someone who immersed herself in the heart of Jesus and who felt driven to love. You know, her beautiful famous quotation here, "In the heart of the church, my mother, I shall be love." And Saint Thérèse of Lisieux, what always, of course, baffles us is how this young sister who didn't really go very far from her home, who died at the age of 23, was it, is patroness of the missions. And Pope Francis attributes a lot of that to the fact that she was someone who had this immersion in the heart of Jesus, which drove her to mission. I also think it's interesting, this paragraph in Dilexit notes, where he actually sees the drive to reconciliation and peace as a fruit of the heart of Jesus. I reflected on this a few weeks ago in Knock, actually. The words of Jesus, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you, a peace the world cannot give. That is my gift to you." Pope Francis says reconciliation and peace are born of the heart. The heart of Christ is all about openness, gift, encounter. And consecration to the heart of Christ has to be seen in relation to, where am I at here? Skipped one, did I? Anyway, it doesn't matter, because all about consecration to the heart of Christ is to be seen in relation to the church's missionary activity. And that, my friends, is our challenge here today. There's a big theme which I'm not going to go into today, but I invite you to look at it yourselves in Dilexit Nos, which is all about consolation, reparation, compunction. Just those of you who were in the pioneer movement or are in it, the prayer, for thy greater glory, and consolation, O most sacred heart of Jesus. I promise, somebody help me here. For you, this, go straight again. For your sake, to give good example, to practice self-denial, and to make reparation for the sins of intemperance, I will sacrifice. You see, the idea of offering up, which was a big thing in my own parents' minds, they used to always say, offer it up, Eamon, offer it up. And Pope Francis is a great reflection on offering it up, that we can join in some way in that suffering, loving heart of the Lord's. I just want to skip on a little bit as I get near the end to think about what are the implications of this for us in our reflections over the next day or so. Woundedness in the church. I'm thinking you're going to be reflecting in workshops and in examples of parish renewal, diocesan renewal, whatever. But if we were to think, what does devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus invite us to reflect on if we were renewing our parishes? And I wanted to put this one at the top. Woundedness in the church. It was very interesting when we did the synodal process in Ireland and we went out to parishes and individuals and dioceses. Coming back was this sense of our church in need of healing in Ireland because of the abuse. And I think when we're reflecting on renewal and rejuvenation or whatever for the future, we cannot forget that our church is wounded. And a lot of our people, of course, above all, survivors of abuse. But not just people who have been directly abused. I have noticed time and again that a lot of our faithful are carrying this wound that they have felt maybe betrayed, hurt, deeply hurt. And we have not yet in this country found a way of allowing our people to speak about that. They do what the Irish people do well. They keep quiet. They carry it. We haven't been able to do it about our trouble and our conflict either. And here we are in Belfast, okay? And we have visitors from all over the world. But one of the things I often find is that people come back here and they say, what are you doing about the hurts and the wounds of your conflict? There are a lot of people out there wounded. And I'm just wondering, is Sacred Heart novena, devotion, calling us to reflect a little bit on that? As a church, as parishes, as dioceses, some of our parishes, the most awful things happened. And sadly, they were happening in some cases out of a distortion of faith and identity and religious allegiance. And we've never really, as a church, looked at that. Not to mention, of course, the awful sins and crimes of abuse. So I just don't want to forget about it. And who's carrying the crosses? Any work on divine renewal or rejuvenation of their parishes and dioceses, we have to think about who are the people who are carrying heavy crosses. It might be addictions, bereavements, and these things need to be at the heart of our parish work. Otherwise, we do not radiate the love of the heart of Jesus. You know, that awful cliche, if Jesus were here today, he'd be out among those people. Are we? I have to look at my own life, my own witness, and how much time I spend on stuff that doesn't touch the hearts, the lives, the wounds of people. There are really good prophets doing that in our church. But how much of it is part of the mainstream of our parishes? The word, of course. Were not our hearts burning? Opportunities for Lectio Divina, for people to really understand and get into reflecting on what was at the heart of the ministry of Jesus. The sacraments, opportunities, and it's beautiful to see in the introduction how many opportunities are being provided here for people to pray. Opportunities, can we offer more opportunities in our parishes for people to rest in the heart of Jesus, as St. John did at the Last Supper. Margaret Mary Alacoque, St. Gertrude, she thought she was so close to the heart of Jesus in her reflection, she could hear his heart beating in her prayer. So do we have enough opportunities for that in our parishes? To deepen understanding through catechesis, led reflection, adult reflection on faith, which can be so enlivening. God rest my mother. She died when she was 90. When she was 85, she wanted me to give her books about the Bible. When she was 85. She knew she needed to know more about the Gospels and that. She had a very powerful faith. But she was thirsty for the Word. Mission and evangelization, well, we'll be talking a lot about that, of course. The gospel of life, the dignity of every person. Is that alive in our parishes? Or is it just a little group who are active in pro-life work? And we can think here about a consistent ethic of life right across everything we do in our parishes and dioceses. The work of mercy, of course. Outreach to the poor. We have St. Vincent de Paul's Society. But it's a dwindling group of really dedicated people. If we were really parishes who were in love with the heart of Jesus and that outpouring, consuming flames that surrounds the heart of Jesus, we would have that as a high priority in our parishes. Outreach and encouraging people to reach out to the poor. Reconciliation I've mentioned. Popular piety I've mentioned. And the last one, penance, fasting, reparation. Those themes are very much part of devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. But once more, they're quite a small niche area in our parishes. So these points here, I think, are just what this devotion challenges us to think about when we were talking about parish renewal. Last year, in November, a number of people came to me and they said, Archbishop Eamon, Pope Francis has written Dilexit. Next year is the 350th anniversary of the revelations to St. Margaret Mary. We'd like to have a Sacred Heart crusade in Ireland. And because I had read Dilexit Nos, I had no option but to say, look, I'll try to support you in whatever way I can. So they went over to Rome, spoke to somebody who spoke to Pope Francis, and they came back from Rome with 4 statues of the Sacred Heart. Now, once more, believe me, quite a number of people I mentioned this to said, do we really need statues of the Sacred Heart around? Yeah? Okay. Pope Francis blessed the statues and said, I am fully behind this. I want this to succeed. So over they came, and throughout this year, they've been inviting parishes and parish communities to take one of the statues and have maybe a retreat or a mission or a few days of prayer reflecting on the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Next thing they came to is, we've been in touch with Paris Le Monial, and we're going to get the relics of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque and St. Claude de la Colombière, and they're coming to Ireland. Archbishop, we'd really like to. We've had Carlo Acutis and St. Killian and relics. But I said, okay, let's do it. I, for example, I welcomed these relics to the Sacred Heart Church in Newry. I could not believe the swarms of people who came. And we might sometimes reflect and say, that's not really what we need. But that night, I spoke about the same things as I'm speaking about here, and people went home on fire. on fire for mission. And then, of course, last Sunday we had the consecration in Knock, and with very little publicity, Father Richard said it was the biggest crowd they've had in Knock this year. And it was just so wonderful because we were doing something that I think the Lord wanted. And we're hoping to continue this as the Jubilee year continues and keep encouraging people to pray the prayers. And to conclude, I just want to play for you the prayer that was used in Knock on Sunday and offer to you devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus as something full of dynamism for our parishes, our dioceses, and our church. I hope this works.
Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, Saviour of the world, gathered together in your name, we consecrate to your most sacred heart ourselves, our home, our family, our parish, and Ireland, our country. We are in great need of your love and protection. You have invited us to come to you, especially those who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and you have asked us to remain in your love. We turn to you today from the depths of our hearts. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, we place all our trust in you. We desire to be close to your beating heart, which is on fire with the Holy Spirit and is burning with love for us. We weep to see your wounded heart, crowned with thorns and pierced through on the cross for our sake. We find comfort in your forgiving heart, which lights the way to the home of our merciful Father, who loved us first. We draw life from your compassionate heart, from which flowed blood and water, the wellspring of the sacraments, of grace in the Church, and the source of eternal life. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, nourish our lives with your word, with the strength of the sacraments, and especially with your body and blood in the Eucharist, the sacrament of love. Carry us in your heart. May each of our names be written on your heart, engraved in letters of love. Have mercy on our suffering world in which you chose to dwell as one of us. Pour out the treasures of your light and love, so that our world may regain the most important and necessary thing of all, its heart. We believe that the world can change, beginning with hearts that are close to your heart. Be alive and at work in us, so that we may radiate faith, hope, and love, especially for the poor, the suffering, and those who are most in need. May your Sacred Heart continue to pour forth the streams of living water that can heal the hurt we have caused, strengthen our ability to love and serve others, and inspire us to journey together towards a peaceful, just, and fraternal world. Lord Jesus Christ, King of love and Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, our homes, and in Ireland, our country.
Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, we place all our trust in you. Thank you very much, everybody.